Hello and welcome to IMD Industry Insights. I'm Brian Self, along with Industrial Machinery Digest publisher William Strickland. Today, our guest is Tim Goss of Deloitte. We'll be discussing how emerging technology affects the manufacturing workforce. Tim, welcome and thanks for being with us. How about getting us started today by telling us about yourself and how Deloitte is helping manufacturers adapt emerging technology on shop floors to make manufacturing roles more attractive to young talent, and also how that tech helps to seek out the higher skilled workers.
So, Brian, great to meet you. Tim Gauss. I lead our smart manufacturing practice for Deloitte. I actually grew up in industry, managed a plant for a period of time myself, and my very first job was actually programming PLC, so I feel like I'm coming back home. But in Deloitte, we have a bunch of investment going on in this space, something that we're really passionate about, and quite frankly, I think is going to shape the future of manufacturing. So I think one of the things you were interested in is just how we're seeing this growth of technology on the plant floor kind of reshape and make it more attractive to a younger generation. And I think that's a very, very apt statement. What we're finding is the technology itself is becoming much more accessible, much more easy to use. And quite frankly, the folks entering the workforce today expect it. They don't want to come into a plant where they're writing stuff down on paper and running around like that type of stuff. They want to have the iPad. They want to have that experience that they have at home come back to them with work. And that's actually where we're going. We're seeing a lot of growth in that area. One thing that I think is I'm pretty personally passionate about is the advent of generative AI and how that's going to start to enter into the manufacturing workforce. What we're finding is that's just a great way to make years and decades of knowledge much more accessible and kind of transition through. But I'll also say though is it's reshaping how our manufacturing clients are sourcing their talent. Right, you are now looking for people who have a little bit more comfort, and I call it digital native or whatever phrase you want to use. But it's how you have to screen and find that talent base is slightly different than it was before. Because at the end of the day, these folks will be working side by side with some pretty advanced technology. Right, there's some pretty pushing the insights and seeing where things are going to go. So as you start to look at that screening mechanism and how players are starting to vet the talent coming through, you're starting to see a lot more use and expectation that those people are also comfortable with technology as well.
Tim, how is this new technology evolving manufacturing roles and the overall tech stack by making manufacturing increasingly software defined?
Yeah, it's a new phrase we're hearing a lot: software defined manufacturing, and that can scare a bunch of folks. Let's be honest, software is not going to take over everything. It's just another way for us to think about that evolution. And what I'm seeing is the ability to constantly update and constantly improve our operations is very much hand in hand with that software kind of entering into the manufacturing space. So the days where you kind of went by your gut and you adjusted this knob here and that knob there, and then that's how you got your machine running the best, are starting to go away. And in fact, those type of insights and those type of automated actions are being driven a lot more by the software and the intelligence that sits within it. But that means that our workforce has to be much more comfortable with understanding how and the limits of that software as well. And so what we're seeing is that the technology stack, which in the past was kind of very much two different worlds. The operational technology world is one spot and kind of air gapped, and you had it in your own plant. It was completely managed there. The other one was kind of the IT world, which was more corporate. Those two worlds have really come together, right? And so that's how you're seeing the advent of things like machine learning, things like artificial intelligence, which is just another way to say fancy algorithms running to drive insights, are really coming part of the day to day of manufacturing, and it's shifted the way we think about driving outcomes.
What skills should organizations recruit and train for as manufacturing evolves?
I'd say that's a tough question to answer because it's changing all the time. It's hard to keep pace with how fast technology is evolving. There was a period of time where folks were pretty convinced that we're going to need to have a bunch of programmers sitting running our plants. And what we're finding is maybe, but maybe not. Actually, there's a lot of these even advanced applications are running in what are called a no-code environment or a low-code environment, which is almost drag and drop to make those type of things come to life. So, long way to say there's not a straightforward answer here, but I'll give you kind of three different insights. One, as I mentioned a couple times, the folks who actually run the lines, they're going to have to be a lot more tech savvy. They're going to have to be comfortable working and using tech because it's just become part of the day-to-day life. And so if you don't have that comfort today, that's a definite area where there's going to be a need to upskill and recruit and train in that way. If you're a supervisor, you better also have that same comfort. If you're thinking about managing a workforce that's working tech day in and day out, the expectation of a true plant floor supervisor is that they're using this to drive a much higher value from what they're doing day to day. I can give you an example of one of our clients has put in place what I would call a dynamic scheduling environment, where the algorithms are looking to say, do I have the right materials? Do I have the right work order ready? And did the right person show up to work that day? And then if the person didn't show up or the material's not there, it reshuffles the entire plan for the day. That type of kind of agility and fluidity is what you have to expect if you're managing the shop floor. And the last piece I'd say is the folks that are kind of maintaining and driving these assets. So your electricians, your engineers, your maintenance mechanics, things of that nature. That also has a bit more of an expectation that you're comfortable not just in the classic OT side of the world, but you're comfortable with this IT side. And that means a much closer partnership with some people that maybe you didn't have to talk to as much in the past, and that's just a new muscle to have to go and create.
Tim, can you tell us how an integrated approach between human workers and technology can lead to improved KPIs such as time to market, quality control, more accurate planning, things like that?
So, I mean, I like to say that it's going to all get easier, faster, and better. I think that's the goal. Whether or not we've kind of gotten there is probably a bit of a different story. But what we're definitely seeing is the people working hand in hand and side by side with technology. Like, this is not the robots taking over the world. This is really having this intelligence make the actions of the past stronger and better. And so I think you're going to find a much more integrated flow of information. We like to talk about manufacturing a lot. I mean, that's my passion. But quite frankly, a lot of what happens in the plant floor is really the direct impact of things that occurred outside of that plant. So it could be the incoming raw materials. It could be the demand changes. Sales go up, sales go down. Having that flow of information come back to your hands on the plant floor makes you stronger along the way. And then I also say the way that we capture information is just fundamentally shifted and is going to continue to do so. So the days of doing quality checks that are offline and maybe recorded in a different system are starting to go away, and they're all kind of one integrated, seamless flow of information. Sometimes using sensors, sometimes using even cameras to capture things, but finding different ways to capture information so it goes in the systems as you'd expect, and you're not kind of walking and keying into different areas and doing stuff differently. So I think you'll find a little bit seamless flow of information. You're going to find a better and more consistent, data flow, and overall that should drive much more stronger results on the plant floor and the end-to-end supply chain as well.
Tim, could you tell us the importance of having a workforce that's focused on driving value with technology that supplements the workers' experience and expertise?
Yeah, it's a great question, and this is one where I caution the clients I speak to, the companies I speak to not think that technology is some magic kind of button you can press and all of a sudden everything happens perfectly. You really need a workforce that doesn't lose the fundamentals of continuous improvement and driving to the bottom line. And yeah, technology will help that get stronger, but at the end of the day, it's still just technology, and we have to have that discipline of driving to excellence in the operations that can be enhanced by but not replaced by the technology. I think with that, even though we may have lots of great tools and toolkits, I still see integrated Lean Six Sigma, those principles coming through day in and day out. If you don't have a clean shop floor, if you don't have 5S, you don't have all those disciplines, you're not going to get to the outcomes no matter how much technology you put in place. So to me, this is really a partnership of the humans with the technology, not a replace, and definitely not a spot where you can lose that kind of drumbeat discipline that comes with operational excellence.
Tim, our core audience is the small to mid-size manufacturers, job shops, that type thing, mom and pop organizations. They are very adverse to change. How would you go about convincing them that this is a direction they need to go in?
What I would say is it's a lot less daunting than what you'd think to get down this path. Um, the costs have come down dramatically. The toolkits that are available have made it much more accessible to a broader bunch of people. So you don't need to have experts necessarily. You don't need to even have your own data scientists and things of that nature to make this start to come to life. So we say, we want to think big, always think big, but start small. Start with something that's really measurable. Make sure you're getting the outcomes. Make sure you're actually transforming your operations, and then scale from there. If you go too big too fast, you can actually end up wasting some money. You want to make sure you're aiming high and seeing where the roll is moving. But quite frankly, it's that starting small and growing from there that I see the most success. And as a small to medium sized company, frankly, that's the sweet spot because I think there's so many of these things that are relatively lower hanging fruit to pick with some of these new technology advancements. And so the ability to sensorize and bring in new data feeds, the ways to apply some different analytics you probably just didn't have the time to do in the past is getting a lot easier. And so I think it's actually the perfect time for that size company to start to tackle this journey. Well, the change and adoption always is the toughest thing about technology. But what I've always kind of grounded on a couple of principles. One, if you're running a job shop and you want to get your productivity up, and this is a way to get there, that's going to make you happy because you're going to put some money in your pocket, right? And at the end of the day, the easiest way to get some change is you start to see some results. The other part, though, is you have to make sure as you tackle these things that you're thinking in the terms of the folks that are going to be using it. You can use whatever frame or phrase you want, but don't lose sight of the actual people who are going to be using the tech, and don't get over your skis as a result. What we find is, uh, I tell this story a lot, but I've got a young daughter. She's 3 years old, and they got an older father. He's well into his 80s, and quite frankly, she probably is using the iPhone better than he is these days. And so, as you think about that new workforce coming in the way, that change curve is actually a lot easier as you start to see that generational shift come as well, as long as you made sure that the tech or whatever you put in place, these advancements are as accessible as what you expect in your day-to-day life. I think with that, you start to bridge, both the outcomes and the ease. The change curve gets a lot easier as you kind of go through it. And I guess the last thing I'd add to that kind of overall change and adoption is don't make any of these things a one-time event. Where we see a lot of companies fall down is they have a big splashy thing, they put in something new, we talk about it, we celebrate it, and then we walk away and don't pay attention. And I can tell you that's where it all slips away, because people's habits will come back and they will stop using what we put in place. So this has to be kind of a continually reinforced journey, so that way you actually get the sustainment and the stickiness, and that's where you get the outcomes and the results. And I think as long as you've worked well with your workforce and you've actually designed it in a way that actually makes their lives easier, you'll find the change is easier than what you'd expect.
Tim, if anybody out there is interested in getting in touch with you or someone else at Deloitte, what's the best way they can go about that?
Well, I mean, you can just drop me an email. It's tgaus@deloitte.com, or you can just go to deloitte.com itself, and we have a whole bunch of stuff on smart manufacturing, a bunch of things to read about, a bunch of things to see. It's like I mentioned, a spot that we feel is really, really important to the future of all of manufacturing in the U.S. A spot where we think there's going to be transformational change in the horizon, and a spot where we're investing a lot to make sure it's successful. I'll call out one thing that I think is really kind of cool. I mentioned in the beginning that we have our own manufacturing plant, which is kind of weird for a consultancy. Let's be honest. Why would we make our own stuff? But the real reality is the only way we can be confident that we're giving the right advice is we test it on ourselves. And then that's the way we actually have a running production line with all the challenges and problems that you have with any type of manufacturing environment. But that makes it real. At the same time, the reason we picked the product, though, is about the workforce. Because at the end of the day, we want to do something with helping drive the future generation. So we produce something that's a STEM education kit for kind of the middle school to high school range. Has a little bit of robotics on it, so they can learn how to program a little bit, and it actually helps drive the next generation for underprivileged or underserved schools. So if you have interest in that stuff, see what we're doing in Wichita. There's a ton of information on it, and actually it's a pretty cool thing I think that we can do together. So, Brian, it was a great chatting with you.
Well, Tim, it was a pleasure having you, and maybe we can get together in the future and discuss how all this transpires.
Absolutely. I'd love to check back in, and I'll update you on what we're seeing and see how it's coming for you guys as well.